Hello, Connecticut, and welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. The title basically says it all. I'm Nancy Barrow, and I will be delving into this new state program and how it can help you and your family. This podcast will give you information you should know about Connecticut paid leave and maybe just a little bit more. Connecticut paid leave brings peace of mind to your home, family, and workplace. Welcome to the Paid Leave Podcast. Well, good morning and welcome. I'm talking to one of the biggest supporters of Connecticut Paid Leave, and the organization's support is one of the reasons why the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act was signed into law in 2019. And I am talking about CWEALF, the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund. And joining in on the conversation today are Executive Director Janée Woods-Weber and Policy Director Maddie Granato. Welcome, ladies.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Oh, thanks for joining us, and we so appreciate it. And you're just such smart, thoughtful, and proactive women, and boy, do we need those now more than ever. So, Maddie, you started getting Connecticut paid leave even talked about. Tell me what that was like from a grassroots perspective, getting Connecticut paid leave. It was what, in 2012 or 2013 that you got involved? Because you were writing about it as an intern.
Yeah, so I actually started at CWEALF as an intern in 2014. So it was a few years after the campaign had started. It was still pretty small. Yeah, my first project was writing fact sheets about paid family and medical leave. So I really had the privilege of seeing, a campaign from its really early stages all the way to until the end. And I think it was really a mix, right, of some grassroots efforts, some grass tops, some real persistence in lobbying at the Capitol. I won't discount that at all either in our efforts. But yeah, I think it was, years and years of just talking about paid family medical leave to really anyone who would listen, going to a lot of different, membership meetings, like other coalition meetings, just really asking for different organizations and people to sign on and support the campaign, however they could at the moment, whether that was just kind of signing on in their name, having their organization listed on our materials, helping us with some communications efforts, doing that direct lobbying right at the Capitol, or really helping us organize events, in their own communities. So it was not a singular effort. It was a very concentrated, I think, focused and persistent effort of a lot of different people over the years.
It was really interesting. I think I told you that I talked to Jillian Gilchrist, who is a representative of West Hartford, and she said, man, it started in 2012 and I was pregnant and I just realized that we really needed this, but then CWEALF just took it and ran with it. She really gives you the majority of support to get this passed. How many times did it go before the legislature and not pass?
I think in around 2013, 2014, I think Representative Gilchrist mentions this. There was a task force passed to study paid leave. And then from there in 2015, there was money allocated in the state budget to do an implementation study on, what a program could actually look like and how it could be implemented here in Connecticut. And that really formed the basis of our advocacy movement, I think, moving forward. And then from 2015 to 2019, there was, really comprehensive legislation introduced every year. We frame it as it took from 2012-ish to 2019 to pass the law. But it was several years in a row of fighting at the Capitol and not seeing it cross the finish line until 2019.
And what did you learn from each time that it didn't pass? Like, I'm sure you walk away when you do those kind of, legislative pushes and it doesn't happen. It's really disappointing. But what do you walk away and learn from that?
Yeah, so me personally, I learned every year that I really hate to lose. That's what I took away from every year that it didn't pass. But I think as a coalition, every year that we saw session end and a bill not cross the finish line, I think we really took, what we had heard from folks, what the opposition was, and we really sharpened our message and created, I think, a much bigger sense of urgency around the issue. I think it also helped that by 2019, every state around us had passed a paid leave policy.
Right.
There's also a lot of national momentum for the issue. So by the time we're about to pass the law, we could really point to other states, right, and be like, this is not that scary. We can do this. It's happening elsewhere. It really works. We know this is a good program. Also, elections matter. I think that's what we learned from the campaign and what people can take from it too, right? In 2018, the state elected a lot of candidates, including Governor Lamont, who were really committed to seeing it cross the finish line. And that's what really helped us in the end, too.
Have you always been interested in policy?
No, actually not at all. I always thought, I was a psychology major in college, and I always thought that I would be, some type of therapist or something. I had really no idea until I found CWEALF, honestly. I was just doing a Google search looking for internships to do the summer that I graduated college before I started my master's degree at UConn School of Social Work. And CWEALF, we have great Google analytics. Thank God we did, because that's how I found CWEALF, and it was really just a great fit for me as a person, but also just the work that we do. Just realized that I'm really passionate about it and passionate about policy. So
pay equity is a big one. What else are you looking for in the next legislative session? What are some of the big key points that CWEALF is really trying to push?
Well, I'll jump in here and give a little bit of context first before we talk about some specific policy priorities. At our organization, we advocate for women and girls. And when we say women and girls, we're also inclusive of trans women and non-binary and gender non-conforming people. Basically, anybody who's harmed by the system of patriarchy or gender-based oppression. We're really focused on advocating for policies that protect and advance economic security for women and for others. So that's always at the forefront of our mind. And we're not just thinking about what raises income for individuals, but also what helps to close the wealth gap, what addresses some of the systemic barriers that we have had to being paid for the value of our work, to being able to accumulate intergenerational wealth, especially for women of color and immigrant women in the state. So that's always what we're thinking about as we chart our course forward around which policies we're going to advocate for. We also try to think about how do these policies work together to really start to create a culture and a society here in Connecticut that values women and values women's work.
Well, that's a big one. To value people for who they are gender-wise, because we still are not equal with men's pay. We have a long way to go.
We sure do. And we had some policies that we were advocating for this past legislative session that didn't make it over the finish line. We will be bringing them back for the next session, particularly around paid sick days.
CWEALF next year is turning 50. It's a big landmark birthday for you guys. What do you think is your main focus? Is it racism? Because, look at what we saw with George Floyd and the Buffalo case, hate crimes. There's so much to fight for. And how do you choose your battles, really?
There is so much to fight for. But we also know that if we are going to be focused on all the things that I just talked about, we really do need to be explicit about addressing the impacts of white supremacy and racism and economic injustice. That is always at the center of our work. That's the equity lens that we're looking through. And when we think about what does it take to uplift the women and girls of Connecticut, our first thought needs to be toward those who are most impacted. And those are women and girls of color, women and girls with low income or living in poverty, women and girls who are immigrants or undocumented, women and girls who are victims or survivors of abuse and violence. We really need to put these people at the center of our work. And that does not mean that by centering that we are excluding white women, that we are excluding higher income women. It doesn't mean that. It simply means that we are focused on with laser precision where the need is the greatest. Because when we advocate and dismantle systems of oppression that hold down those of us that have the least, what we have seen is that we all benefit.
Yeah, well, we're seeing reproductive rights tighten for women in this country. It's really scary to be a woman right now. How do you battle that thought process?
Well, fear doesn't mean we don't act. We can still organize, come together, educate ourselves, educate others, be truthful about the systems that are oppressing us, and really follow the leadership of the people who have been ignored, disenfranchised, disinvested, and disempowered. Those are the people who will show us the way forward, especially in moments when we might be fearful or when we might not know what to do. We need to follow the lived experience and the wisdom of those who have been surviving and sometimes even thriving despite everything this country keeps throwing at us as women, especially women of color.
And how do you help women and girls who are disenfranchised and marginalized? How do you help them thrive? How does CWEALF do that?
Well, of course, through our policy advocacy work, which Maddie can share a little bit more with you about, and also through our legal education work, which I'd be happy to share about.
Yeah, so CWEALF is, we're really active at the state capitol and at the, legislative building during session, and also out of session too, really making sure that the voices and the experiences of women and girls, especially women and girls of color, are centered right in the policy making process. So we do that by leading a legislative agenda that's, as Janée mentioned, centered on women's economic security and, doing some direct lobbying at the Capitol for our policy priorities. But we also are a resource for folks who also want to get involved in the process, right? So we do a lot of advocacy trainings, put out some resources and toolkits for folks to really know, see themselves in the process and how they can get involved and, share their story, testify on a bill, contact their legislator.
When you look at the legislature, it's still a lot of white men. There's not a lot of women, and there's not a lot of women of color. It's hard to find the representation that we need. And how do we change that? How do we get women to get into public office in such an ugly time of politics? It's a hard thing to think about, but we need more representation in the legislature to make change.
That's absolutely true. And the number one thing we can do is to ask more women to run and then support them when they say they want to run. Mm-hmm. Women on average need to be asked 6, 7, 8 times by various different people before they'll even consider running, compared to some men who seem to wake up one morning and think, I think I'd like to run for office, and then do.
Right. And
women need to be asked more often. And we also need to be putting the supports in place that make it possible for women to run strong, well-funded campaigns. And that means creating a pipeline through not just civic engagement education in our schools, but also through the town committees, which is often a gatekeeper to who gets chosen to run and who gets support to run. But also we need to be looking beyond the traditional notions of what qualifies someone to run for office. You don't need to be a lawyer to run for office. You don't need to be a successful business person to run for office. There are lots of different qualities and life skills that make a person extremely valuable to the folks that they would like to represent up at the Capitol. So that's why I always get excited when we hear about nurses who are running or teachers who are running, or people who have a lot of experience doing advocacy for their children around special education. I think that we need more of those kinds of folks.
Johanna Hayes, look at her. She was amazing. Teacher of the Year, and then she runs, and she wins. Mm-hmm. And it was a hard fight, but she did it. I think that the problem is also, they don't get paid a lot.
They do not. Folks who work at the Connecticut General Assembly get paid very little for what is billed as a part-time job. But the folks we talk to on a regular basis seem to be working full-time. We certainly need to continue to work toward increasing pay. And I also think it's time. Connecticut needs to really start thinking seriously about having a full-time legislature instead of a part-time legislature.
Is that something that other states have?
I think it varies across the country. Can fact check that. But yeah, to Janee's point, I think, we really encourage women to run, right? And then it's like we're encouraging them to get elected to this job that is low paid, has no support, and is technically part-time, but we know that it's not, right? So I think there's a lot of structural changes that I think need to be made in Connecticut at the state level to really make the legislature a place that is like a sustainable work, right, for people, especially people with children.
With women who have kids, who's going to take care of the kids? We women are predominantly caretakers of pretty much everybody in the home, right? And even elderly parents that we have to take care of. And you said, Janée, to your point, you don't have to be in politics. You don't have to be a political sci major to run for office. You just have to have the will to want to make a difference and change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And There are lots of steps that you can take on that journey. For example, you can get trained in advocacy work. We have a peer advocacy program here at CWEALF that we work on. We're also really thinking about how do we bring the voices of women in community closer into our policy work at the Capitol. We are working on a program we call Women's Wisdom Circles. We piloted it last year, where they're basically community conversations where women in a community can come together and share their collective wisdom, the lessons they've learned from their own lived experience about the challenges and problems that they're seeing impact them and their families and their communities, and what they think those solutions are. And we will be expanding that practice moving forward. We have a community organizer who will be joining us at some point this summer. It's a brand new role at CWEALF. We're very excited to be bringing those women's voices closer into the Capitol so that when we sit down and craft our policy agendas, we are really working on the issues that women in community say are impacting them. And we're really considering what they say the solutions will be, because people who are most impacted have a lot of the answers about what would be transformative for their lives. When we think about what does it take to encourage women to run for office, the first step is to involve them at the most basic levels and ask them what's going on in your life. What change would you like to see? Because when people really feel valued by a process, they want to be part of it. And so my hope long-term is that through these women's wisdom circles, we will inspire some women to take that next step, to become advocates for themselves, for their communities, that they will want to even go further and receive some training and perhaps consider run for office and then run for office and then win. And then become our champions on all of the issues that we want to see turned into policy solutions. There are some things that I'm really excited about working on here at the organization with Maddie and with the rest of our team, our small but mighty team. A lot of people are surprised to find that there are only 6 of us. We do so much. We're small, but we accomplish a lot because, women get it done. We get the job done. So there are lots of things I'm excited to help shepherd us toward in our 50th anniversary year, which is next year, and to really map out the next 50 years of our work and to really see what new policies we can get embedded here in the state to create the kind of Connecticut that all women and girls deserve to live in. So that's where my mind is.
So you have a lot on your plate. When you talk about racial equity and economic equity, where do you start to battle that?
Start where you can find a thread to pull and pull that thread until you start to unravel a little bit. I think sometimes we can paralyze ourselves in thinking, the problems are too big. The problems are too interconnected. Doing any one thing is not going to have an impact. I don't think that's true. We need to be very mindful and judicious about the threads that we are pulling and really think critically. If we're pulling on this thread, what's the plan? Mm-hmm. Who are we centering in this work? What's the ultimate goal? Who's going to benefit? Who do we need to be part of this coalition building process? Who can our champions be to create that kind of change? And we just keep doing that. We just keep finding new threads to pull. And we support those who are working around us, even if they're not working on our exact issues. If they are working toward the broader goal, we are part of a broader community of people doing advocacy work. And so we show up like we're part of a community to help other people pull their threads as well.
Mm-hmm. And how do you get money to do all these things that you need to do? Because you're a nonprofit. How do you fund all these things?
It's a lot of work, but we do pursue grant funding from different foundations. We're very fortunate to have some strong relationships with a few foundations. However, grant funding does not cover the total cost of our operations. So we also do fundraise for individual donations and for donations from local businesses and organizations here in the state. We run appeal campaigns. You can also go to our website, CWEALF.org, and click the donate button if you'd like to become a monthly sustainer. So we really do rely on the generosity of our individual donors. And then we put the hard work into developing relationships with foundations so that they understand the importance of the work and want to make investments in it.
As executive director, when you walked into that chair your first day, I'm sure it was overwhelming, but I'm sure you had a good grasp of what you wanted to do and how you wanted to lead. How are you doing this Janée's way? What is Janée's way to be an executive director and lead CWEALF into its 50th year?
Well, when it comes to the organization itself, I'm trying to build the kind of organizational culture and work environment that I have always wanted to work in, and that I hope will be conducive and healthy for the staff to be working in. These are really hard, challenging issues that we work on. So we need to make sure that we have a workplace and a work culture that is really focused on letting people be their whole selves, really respecting and valuing the contributions that each person on staff brings, creating opportunities for people to shine and to grow in their roles, because that's how we keep this work moving forward, is with good ideas and the courage and the stamina to keep persisting in the work.
That was going to be my next question. Where do you get your stamina from? Because the work never ends. You pass laws, and that's great because paid leave was so amazing and needed. There's a lot out there. How do you keep your stamina going? How do you guys do that?
For me, being a part of our staff at CWEALF is, I think, part of what keeps me going and excited about the work that we do. Like we just have a great group of people. I can't think of a better workplace or coworkers to do this work with. And I think personally, just being able to take the time when we need it, is really important in building that culture. Like it's okay to take time off, or to take a day, to take a few hours if you need to. In a sense, this varies a little bit, but in a sense, like having the ability to work from home helps because you can go take a walk. I can take a break from my computer for an hour and take my dog for a walk now that I wouldn't have been able to do that. I think for me too, what always kept me going during the campaign for paid family leave was really my own family. It was around the time that my brother, I'm one of four, I'm the youngest of four. So my brother and my sisters were all having children, like around the same time that we were really working on paid family medical leave. So like seeing it so close, and then they were really lucky in terms of the amount of time that they had, but I think being able to become an aunt, right? And be able to spend that time with them, but also see the issue that I was working on so closely, that kept me going through paid leave. And yeah, just the people that we surround ourselves with, I think all the time, and our network of advocates and my coworkers, that's really the key for me. But
I think it helps that, yes, we all do genuinely like each other,
yeah.
which is always a wonderful thing. Yeah. But also we each as individuals firmly believe in the deep need for this work. And we believe that change is possible. We love to quote Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. We always say policy is our love language. Mm. When you operate from that place, it gives you energy. We know that so many of the injustices and so many of the challenges that we are advocating around for change were created by design. They were created either by intentional policy or by lack of policy. So that means good policy can make all of those situations better. And because we know that is a possibility and we have seen it happen more than once, we've seen it happen with the passage of paid family medical leave, with the salary transparency law, with some of the great policies that got passed up at the Capitol during this last session. We know that it is possible, but we also know that it takes time. So we wake up and we do each day at a time while still making a long-term plan. But, we find moments to laugh a lot about all of it.
I think what I have always loved the most about CWEALF and our work is that we not only fight for change at the systemic level, right, but we also, run and operate a really great and meaningful direct service program where we support people through the legal system, right? We work to close the civil legal justice gap, right, for folks who might not qualify for legal aid, but can't afford an attorney, right? Because attorneys are very expensive. So I think just the, balance between those two programs, and, now we're really working hard to make sure that they are even more deeply connected, right? Our policy program and our legal ed are intertwined in how we're doing our work moving forward. I think that's what really excites me as well.
And do you help people when there's like family law issues, or if there's issues of domestic violence in there? Do you give them help with that legally?
Yes, people can call our information and referral hotline, or there's a form on our website that you can fill out to talk to our highly trained staff and really incredible group of volunteers who will take the time to talk with you about what your situation is, really help you navigate through the different possibilities that are open to you, help you understand what's going on if you have a court case or what that process might be. In many cases, people can be connected to an attorney through our cooperating attorney network who can provide low bono or pro bono services after an initial free consultation. So yes, we do provide some legal information and importantly, moral support to women who call us around so many of these issues related to family law, immigration issues, housing issues, workplace discrimination issues. Our community advocacy manager, Nilda, goes to court with people if needed.
Wow.
It is a very person-centered, direct service.
I'm hoping that we can get a national paid leave program. Do you think that we'll eventually get one? Because I always love throwing this fact out that the United States joins Papua New Guinea, Tonga, the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, Nauru, and Palau without a comprehensive plan. Do you think we're going to get a national plan?
I certainly hope so. Right. And it's disgraceful that, we haven't learned so far, 2+ years into a pandemic, how important paid family medical leave is, on a national level. Where would we be right now if we had that program in place well before COVID, right? But I think it just goes to show that, again, elections really matter. And, what we do in November, it's not voting is not the be all and end all of policy, right? But it's a start to get us towards the policies that we want to see in our country.
We're long overdue for that policy at a federal level. And we do hope with every fiber of our collective being at CWEALF that we get there and that we have a plan that is at least as comprehensive as Connecticut's plan. For me, particularly against this backdrop of not being able to get federal policies passed around a lot of the things that we care about, the best part of my role, the best part of my participation at CWEALF is knowing that the lives of women and girls have been changed for the better. The lives of all of us have been changed for the better in Connecticut because CWEALF is here.
Yeah.
Because CWEALF has done this work. It is extremely gratifying and motivating to go to work every day knowing that we have made a real contribution.
Thank you both for coming on this podcast. CWEALF Executive Director Janée Woods-Weber and Policy Director Maddie Granato. Thank you so much, both, for coming in here and for your continued support with Connecticut Paid Leave and doing what you do for women and girls all over Connecticut.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. To apply for Connecticut Paid Leave benefits, you can go to ctpaidleave.org or you can call 877-499-8606. This has been another edition of the Paid Leave Podcast. Please like and subscribe so you'll be notified about new podcasts that become available. Connecticut Paid Leave is a public act with a personal purpose. I'm Nancy Barrow, and thanks for listening.